Welcome to class. We're going to continue with sugar paste flowers, and today we're going to make orchids. So our orchid has an anatomy, and we are going to need to make our column with a mold. We're also going to make our sepals with two different cutters and our anther that goes around the column. So it's sort of like the throat of the orchid. So we have to start, as we do with our usual, with our tools. And I have my sugar paste ready. So I'm going to take a piece of this, and I put it again back in my plastic bag and cover it with a damp towel. And I'm going to work it into a nice soft paste. So to start this off, we're going to have to make sure that we have it hooked on very well. So once I have this worked, I've already made and bent over a wire with a small hook. And that's that small little hook that you need, a shepherd's hook. And I have my glue that's ready. So I'm going to take this sugar paste, I'm going to take my mold, I'm going to press it into my mold. Now with silicone molds, you can do it directly, but I find it's best just to take the molds, put them in the freezer for a few minutes, let them get very, very, very cold, and then once they're very cold, you put the sugar paste in that. Then pop it back in the freezer, and you have a beautiful, clean mold. So I put that in there. I'm going to take a little bit of the extra out. And you can always press just a little bit more where it may come up. I don't want it to be too bulbous, but I want to have enough sugar paste so that my hook will stay. And then there's a little spot there for the eyes. So I'm just going to take this and press it right inside. Use just a little Crisco on my fingers to keep it from sticking. Press that in and try and make sure I work it as much as I can into the mold so that it fills it completely. Whatever's left, I can get a little bit of that excess off. And then, as usual, put your extra sugar paste back in your plastic bag under a damp towel. A little bit of glue, and I'm going to take a little bit off. I don't want a lot of it. And I'm going to work this right into the column. And I'm going to wiggle it just as we've done others and make sure that I get it right to the center. And I'm going to pop that out. Shape it slightly, give it a slight bend, and if there's anything on there that's a bit of a ridge or an edge, I can just push that in with my fingers. We're not going to see that. And then just a little bit more glue, and that little bit of glue that was available on my hand, I'm just going to tap it on top of my sugar paste and then turn around, put it right on top of the mold. I have to release it just slightly. Oh, not coming out. So pop it out. There we go. And there we have the column for our orchid. Now you can do this in a variety of colors. It depends on the kind of orchid you're going to make. This one is going to be a little bit like a Cymbidium orchid, so it's going to be slightly green. And then I'm just going to take that and hang it up and let it dry. So it needs 24 hours, just as we do for any of our centers, 24 hours to dry. In the meantime, I'm now going to make the petals. I'm going to massage my dough. I'm going to roll out my sugar paste. For this one, I don't need it to be wired. So we made the throat, or the center of it. Now we had to let that dry overnight. Once it's dry overnight, we're now going to add this petal directly to it. You also have to make sure that you cup just a little bit. So we're using this other tool here, this other modeling tool. We're going to stretch it so it has a nice natural look to it. And you can stretch them, you can exaggerate a little bit if you want to create a real line. Take the smaller one, put just little striations in there. It'll be picked up by the dusting later. Don't want it perfectly round. And then you're going to cup them coming back towards you. You can decide which one cups best for you. Use both of them and just cup all the way inward towards the back of the petal. So you see how it curls up? That's what you want. And it's alright to create those lines with your ball tool, because that'll be picked up by your coloring. Then you want to brush off any excess powder. You're going to use a little glue. And then we're going to attach it to our throat. You can push it down just a little further to give yourself enough support, because it is a heavy petal. You don't want it to fall off. And then we're going to place it on our bumpy board and let it hang away to dry. Now we'll make the sepals. We're going to start with a nice piece of sugar paste, and as usual we're going to rework it and make sure that it's nice and warm so it has the maximum stretch. We're going to use our groove board here, put it on top of our groove board against that little sausage there, and go across as many grooves as we can, and then begin to roll down, because we want to get some of that veining in there, and then roll up. Take it off of our groove board, turn it over, and now I'm going to cut with the largest petal. As far up as I can, pressure equally on the whole cutter, and again, as we usually do, pull our sugar paste away. I'm going to put this underneath plastic to keep it moist, and now I'm going to cut, if I can, 2 of the other sepals. I think I can get 2 out of this, so I'll move this up just a little bit. You can see there, I'm not concerned about having too much of the veining. A little wiggle, pull the sugar paste away. In the plastic it goes with a damp towel. I'm going to get 2 of these out of there, which is perfect. Pull the sugar paste away. I need to do that to roll my sugar paste one more time, and then I'm going to get both 2 cutters, 2 petals out of this, and 2 petals out of this. So now we're ready to go to the next stage, which is to soften the sugar paste. We've made the sugar paste beautiful, we've rolled it nice and thin, but we still have to soften it so it has that paper-like appearance that you normally have with flowers. So before we start with that, we have to wire. And on these we're going to be using a straight wire, and I have a 26 gauge. It has a little flexibility and it's not too thick. Again, put a little bit of your gum or glue on there and then take a little off. And then right underneath, wherever the veining is, we want to go about halfway up. So I'm going to take it and wiggle it, trying to make sure that I keep it close to the vein surface. I don't want it to come out on the other side. It's there, that's done. Now I'm going to take my ball tool and I'm going to start to smooth my edges. Again, halfway on, halfway off. Make sure you don't have that curved edge or look to it, so roll on the inside just a little bit more. And then once it's smooth, we're going to take it and vein it. We've seen this before. It's a veiner. Use the smaller one, put it there. A fair amount of pressure. Now if I want to, I can also give it a little bit of a ruffle. So I put the veining on there. Now I'm going to take the smaller size of my ball tool, make sure that it's nice and dry. A little bit of powder if I need to on my board or my sugar paste. And then I take that ball tool and just along the edge, go back and forth, just to give it a little ruffled look. And you'll see it begin to curl, and that gives it the presence or look of life. Dust it off slightly if there's any additional powder on there. And then I can curl it just to pull out a little bit, and I can let it hang. You can also slightly bend it if you want to, just to give it a look like if it's you know, drying up a little bit, or a little bit of natural look to it. Not everything's perfect. And then we curl out our tips just a bit, and you can put it on a bumpy board just like this. And you can get these at any, you know, home store where they sell these bubble mats, these bath, what are they called? Egg crates. So you can do it like that. Or you can use a regular egg crate at home and just put a cloth across it. So now I'm going to do that for every single one of my petals. So for the last ones, I just want to make sure that I have a little bit of a curved shape. So I'm going to, for the larger sepals, I'm going to take and push it inside the bumpy foam so it has a nice little curve to it. And you can just slightly bend it if you're worried about your wire being too far up, but just give it a little curve like that so it cups the center of the orchid. So we've made all of our pieces that we need for our orchid. Now we need to allow them to dry. And so they're going to need to dry overnight. So let them rest for 24 hours, and then you're going to come back and we're going to color them and put them together. So now we're going to put the flower together. Everything's dried. Now we just need to color it. So when we're coloring our flowers, one of the things I want you to think about is the natural things. You see something and it says it's orange or it's red. But if you look very closely, you'll see that there's sometimes some little subtle colors underneath of it. So you can play with your flowers, and that gives it much more of a realistic look. If you add little hints of yellow, a little hint of red, a little hint of purple or blue, wherever it may be appropriate. So that's exactly what I'm going to do with my orchid. Its base is green, but now I'm going to use some green powders, a little lighter, a little darker, and a little bit of yellow. So what I have here is I have a nice apple green. I'm going to put a little bit of that there right on my paper, and I don't need much. You can always add to it. They're very expensive, so be conservative with your colors. I have a little daffodil yellow. I'll put some of that out there. I have a little bit of red already there, and I have something called a pale green. Now greens come in a variety of colors, or shades I should say, so you should get a few of them. Don't think one green is going to do everything for you. Moss green is really nice to have as well. It's a little deeper green. And these are flat colors, so they don't have any shine to them. So for our flowers, that's what we want, is a flat color. So I have my cornstarch here as well, because you want to use cornstarch to make sure that you keep the flowers very, very powdery and light. A lot of times if you take the flower and you put your brush in and then put the color directly onto the flower, the sugar paste can absorb sometimes too much of it, and there's too much of a concentration of color, and it looks like it was painted. So to avoid that, mix a little cornstarch with it and mix it nice and thin and light. So I have my petal here. It's dry. You can see all the ruffles that have been there, that have stayed as I put it in there. So now I'm just going to use a little bit of my cornstarch, mix it up, and I'll start out with my lighter green first and just brush, and I hold my petal right to the table, right to my board, and you can see that it picks it up. And I'm going to do that on the back side as well. And now I've gotten a nice little brush of that pale green on there. I'm going to touch with a little bit of the darker green. Again, just a little bit of cornstarch in there to control it, and then start to put the green in there. And I'm putting it in brushes straight down, following the line of the veining of the flower itself. Do the same thing on the back side. And then right down the center, if I want to deepen that, I can. And now I'm going to use a little yellow. And it's amazing that the yellow actually kind of helps to make the green even more green. And you don't have to think too much about it. You can be very random. If you look at your flowers closely, you'll see, you know, nature has some really concentrated areas of color, and then other parts of it are just random. And I'm going to use just a little bit of red too, because this flower has red on the throat, so it would make sense that there's just a little bit of red somewhere in the plant. And I'm going to put that along the vein. You don't have to be heavy with it. It can be very light, and sometimes just the lightest amount gives the hint of color without it being obvious. And you can see right there it starts to change the characteristic of the flower. So I've done that already for all of them, and you can see there's a little bit of red in there, a little bit of yellow, and they don't have to be identical. Now the last thing is to do the center. And as I've said before, make yourself a couple of extra petals just in case as you're putting it together something should break. You don't have to stop. You can continue. So right here I've put a little bit of red right in the center, but now I have to give this orchid that characteristic concentrated red dots on it. So I'm going to use a little bit of alcohol, and you can use vodka, you can use any kind of high percentage alcohol. I'm going to use a small brush because I want to be able to control what I'm doing. And I'm going to put just a little alcohol there because I don't need much, and a little bit of my color. I'm going to pick this up just a little bit more. And then I'm going to take my throat, and on the inside of it, I'm going to start to put little dots of color inside. I'm going to work that up into the throat. Right into my orchid. I'll even put a trail that comes down so you can see it going inside. And that's that. You can, if you want to, put a little bit along the edges, but normally they don't have it, just right in the center like that. Now we're ready to put everything together. So we have to tape. So we've taped before, so we're going to do the same thing we've done as we did with our tulips, as we did with our lily. We made sure that we had green tape, and we're going to tape them all together. So the taping process is the same. We have to start with our center. But for this, what we're going to put on first is going to be the smaller of the two sepals. You want to make sure that it stands out against the back like that, and then the last two. So we've seen things in nature that give us thirds, so we can always use that as the way we put our flowers together. So we want to make sure that this one, these two reach down a little bit. And now I'm going to wrap this the whole way around, going all the way down again. Now I can adjust my petals where I want them to be. And if I'm looking at it as I'm looking at this, I want just a little bit more red. I'm seeing the red in the throat, and I'd like to see just a little bit along the petals themselves. So you can always go back and just touch up slightly. Take a little brush, a little paint, a little petal color. I said it paint, but I guess it's paint for flowers. And I want to bring that red out on the petal just a little more. I can also put some right here on the back of the throat and a touch of deep green so it looks like it has depth. Putting that deep green will give it even more depth. And sometimes you might need a little bit of a stronger brush just to concentrate that color. So have a couple of brushes there for you to get the job done. So I want to deepen the green right at the base because where everything joins, it's always a darker presence. And up on the throat there. And get all of the petals, don't skip any of them. There we go. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. Let me know, share if you have any questions, just post them. I'll respond. See you in next class.